The sound of men's voices outside the stable made Grace Elwood press herself harder against the rough wooden boards, her breath catching in her throat as she tried to make herself invisible in the darkness of 1876 Montana territory. She had been running for 3 days straight, ever since she witnessed what she should never have seen in that saloon back in Silver Bow. The image was burned into her mind. Charles Devlin, the mine owner everyone respected, shooting an unarmed prospector in cold blood over a disputed claim. When their eyes had met through the crack in the storage room door where she had been collecting linens, Grace knew her life had changed forever. Devlin's cold smile and the slight shake of his head told her everything. She would never be safe if she stayed, so she ran. She took nothing but the clothes on her back and the small amount of money she had saved from working at the boarding house. Grace had hoped to make it to her aunt's place in Helena, but Devlin had men everywhere, and she kept seeing them in every town she passed through. Riverton was supposed to be just another stop, a place to rest for a few hours before moving on, but exhaustion had finally caught up with her. The stable was warm at least, filled with the comforting smell of hay and horses. Grace had slipped in after dark, finding a corner in the back where she could hide behind some feed sacks. She told herself it would just be for a few hours, just until she regained some strength. But fear and fatigue had overwhelmed her, and she had fallen into a fitful sleep. Now, hearing those voices, panic seized her chest. What if Devlin's men had tracked her here? What if they were searching every building in town? "Easy there, Storm," a male voice said, much closer than the others. "I know you are tired, but we have got to get you settled for the night." The stable door creaked open and lamplight flooded the space. Grace held her breath, making herself as small as possible behind the feed sacks. She could hear boots on the wooden floor, steady and unhurried. Through a gap in the sacks, she could see a tall figure leading a magnificent black horse into one of the stalls. "There you go, boy," the man said softly. His voice was deep but gentle, the kind of voice that immediately put the animals at ease. "Let me get that saddle off you." Grace watched as he worked, her heart still racing. He was young, probably not much older than her own 21 years. Even in the dim lamplight, she could see he was handsome, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and broad shoulders that spoke of hard work. He moved with a quiet confidence that suggested he was completely at home in this space. She needed to wait until he left. Then she could slip out and find somewhere else to hide. But as she shifted slightly to get into a better position to watch him, her elbow knocked against a metal bucket that had been hidden behind the feed sacks. The clang echoed through the stable like a gunshot. The man spun around, his hand instinctively moving to his hip where Grace noticed he wore no gun. His eyes scanned the darkness, alert but not frightened. "Who is there?" he called out. "Show yourself." Grace squeezed her eyes shut, debating her options. She could stay hidden and hope he would think it was just a rat or some other animal. But something in his voice, that gentle quality she had heard when he spoke to his horse, made her think he might not be a threat. Still, she remained silent. "I know someone is back there," he said, taking a step closer. "I am not going to hurt you, but I need to know who is in my stable." "Your stable?" So he owned this place. That made the situation even worse. Grace slowly stood up, her legs shaky from crouching for so long. As she stepped into the lamplight, she saw his eyes widen in surprise. "Madam," he said, immediately removing his hat. "I apologize, I did not mean to startle you." Up close, she could see his face more clearly. He had warm brown eyes and a kind expression, though there was curiosity there too. He was probably wondering what a woman was doing hiding in his stable at night. "I am sorry," Grace said quickly, her voice rough from thirst and exhaustion. "I did not mean to trespass. I was just resting for a bit. I will leave now." She moved to walk past him, but her legs betrayed her. 3 days of poor sleep and barely any food had taken their toll, and she stumbled. He caught her arm, steadying her with a surprisingly gentle grip. "Easy there," he said, the same tone he had used with his horse. "You look like you have not had a proper meal in days." "When was the last time you ate?" Grace pulled her arm away, though not harshly. She was too tired to be truly defensive. "I am fine. I just need to be on my way." "It is almost midnight," he said, frowning. "Where exactly are you planning to go at this hour?" She did not have an answer for that. The truth was, she had no plan beyond staying alive and staying ahead of Devlin's men. Helena seemed impossibly far away now, and she was not even sure she could make it another day without rest. He seemed to read something in her silence because his expression softened. "Look, I do not know your situation, and you do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but you should not be sleeping in a stable. It is not safe, and it is going to get cold tonight." "I have nowhere else to go," Grace admitted quietly. The words came out before she could stop them, and she hated how defeated she sounded. The man studied her for a long moment, and she found herself meeting his eyes. There was something genuine there, something that made her think maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. "My name is Isaac Lang," he said finally. "I own this stable and the house just up the road. My mother lives with me and we have a spare room. My home is yours if you need a safe place to stay." The words hung in the air between them, and Grace felt tears prick at her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness, since anyone had offered help without expecting something in return. But could she trust this stranger? What if accepting his offer put him in danger too? "I cannot," she whispered. "You do not understand. There are people looking for me." "Are they your family?" Isaac asked carefully. "A husband?" "No," Grace said quickly. "Nothing like that. I witnessed something I should not have, and now a very dangerous man wants to make sure I never speak of it." Isaac's jaw tightened, and she saw anger flash in his eyes, though she instinctively knew it was not directed at her. "All the more reason you should not be alone in a stable. Whatever trouble you are in, you will be safer under a proper roof, with people who can help watch out for you." "I do not want to bring danger to your door," Grace said, but even as she spoke, she could feel her resistance weakening. She was so tired, so scared, so alone. "Let me worry about that," Isaac said firmly. "Right now, you need food and rest. Come on, we can talk more in the morning after you have had a chance to recover." He picked up his lamp and gestured toward the stable door. Grace hesitated for just a moment longer, then followed him. What choice did she really have? She could not keep running forever, not in the state she was in. Maybe this Isaac Lang was exactly what he appeared to be. A good man offering help to someone in need. Or maybe she was making a terrible mistake. Either way, her body had made the decision for her. She needed rest, and she needed it now. The walk to his house was short, just up a small hill from the stable. It was a modest 2-story building, well-maintained with a covered porch and flower boxes in the windows. Even in the darkness, Grace could tell it was a home that was cared for. Isaac opened the door quietly and led her into a cozy front room. The embers of a fire still glowed in the hearth, casting a warm orange light over comfortable furniture and handmade quilts draped over the chairs. "Wait here," he said softly. "I will get my mother. She will want to make sure you are properly looked after." He disappeared up the stairs, and Grace stood awkwardly in the center of the room, feeling out of place in this comfortable, safe space. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps, and a woman descended the stairs, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. She was probably in her late 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a braid and the same kind eyes as her son. "Oh, you poor dear," she said immediately. taking in Grace's disheveled appearance and exhausted face. "Isaac told me you have been traveling. Come, sit down. I am Martha Lang. You are safe here." The genuine warmth in her voice broke something inside Grace, and before she could stop herself, tears were streaming down her face. All the fear and exhaustion of the past 3 days came pouring out, and Martha immediately pulled her into a gentle embrace. "There now," Martha said soothingly. "You are safe. Whatever has happened, you are safe now." Isaac stood back, looking uncomfortable with the display of emotion but also concerned. His mother guided Grace to a chair by the fire and disappeared into what Grace assumed was the kitchen. She returned moments later with a plate of bread, cheese, and cold chicken, along with a glass of water. "Eat slowly," Martha instructed kindly. "You will make yourself sick if you eat too fast after going so long without food." Grace tried to follow the advice, but the moment the food touched her lips, she realized just how hungry she was. She forced herself to take small bites, to chew slowly, even though every instinct told her to devour everything on the plate. "Now then," Martha said, settling into the chair across from her while Isaac remained standing near the fireplace. "You do not have to tell us anything you do not want to, but we would like to help if we can." Grace swallowed her bite of bread and looked between the two of them. They were strangers, but they had shown her more kindness in the past 15 minutes than she had experienced in days. Maybe they deserved to know the truth. Maybe they needed to know, so they could understand the danger they might be exposing themselves to. "My name is Grace Elwood," she began. "I was working at a boarding house in Silver Bow when I witnessed a murder. Charles Devlin, the mine owner, shot a man in cold blood over a disputed claim. He saw me, and I knew he would not let me live to tell anyone what I had seen. So I ran. I have been trying to get to my aunt's place in Helena, but his men seem to be everywhere." Isaac's expression had grown dark as she spoke. "Charles Devlin, I have heard of him. He has a reputation for being ruthless, but I did not know he was a murderer." "He is," Grace said quietly. "And he has enough money and power to make sure no one ever holds him accountable. That prospector he killed probably has family somewhere wondering what happened to him, but they will never know the truth. Devlin will make sure of that." "That is not right," Martha said firmly. "No man should be above the law no matter how much money he has." "Right or not, that is the way it is," Grace said. "Which is why I need to keep moving. I have already put you both in danger just by being here." "Nonsense," Martha declared. "You are not going anywhere in your condition. You will stay here tonight, get some proper rest, and in the morning we will figure out what to do next. Isaac, go make up the spare room for Miss Elwood." Isaac nodded and headed upstairs. Grace watched him go, still not quite believing this was happening. These people did not know her, had no reason to help her, and yet they were opening their home without hesitation. "Why are you doing this?" she asked Martha. "You do not even know me." Martha smiled gently. "Because you need help, dear. It is as simple as that. Isaac and we know what it is like to struggle, to need help and have nowhere to turn. When Isaac's father died 5 years ago, we nearly lost everything. The people in this town rallied around us, helped us keep the stable and this house. We learned then that kindness matters, that helping each other is what makes us human. So when someone comes to us in need, we help. It is what Isaac's father would have wanted." Grace felt her throat tighten with emotion again. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I do," Martha said softly. "Now finish eating and then you can get some rest. Things always look a little less frightening after a good night's sleep." Grace was not sure about that, but she appreciated the sentiment. She finished her food, and Martha showed her upstairs to a small but comfortable bedroom. There was a real bed with clean sheets and a quilt, a wash basin with fresh water, and even a nightgown laid out for her. "It was mine when I was younger," Martha explained, seeing Grace's look at the nightgown. "It should fit you well enough. Sleep as late as you need tomorrow. You are safe here." After Martha left, Grace washed as best she could and changed into the nightgown. It was soft and worn, comfortable in a way her own clothes had never been. She climbed into the bed and nearly wept at the feeling of a real mattress beneath her. For 3 nights, she had slept on the ground or in uncomfortable hiding spots, always alert for danger. Here, in this room, she could finally let her guard down just a little. But as she lay in the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling, Grace could not stop thinking about Isaac Lang. His quiet strength, his kind eyes, the way he had immediately offered to help without asking for anything in return. She had met plenty of men in her 21 years, but none quite like him. She told herself not to be foolish. This was just a temporary safe haven, a brief respite before she had to move on. She could not afford to develop feelings for anyone, especially not now when her life was in danger. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, it was Isaac's face she saw in her mind, and the memory of his voice saying, "My home is yours." Morning came gently, with sunlight filtering through the curtains. Grace woke slowly, momentarily confused by her surroundings before memory returned. She was safe, at least for now, in the home of Isaac and Martha Lang. She could smell coffee and something baking, and her stomach reminded her that one meal was not enough to make up for 3 days of near starvation. She dressed in her own clothes, which someone had thoughtfully cleaned and left folded on a chair, and made her way downstairs. Martha was in the kitchen, pulling fresh biscuits from the oven. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in days," Grace admitted. "Thank you again for your kindness." "Sit down and have some breakfast," Martha said. "Isaac is out working in the stable, but he will be in soon." Grace sat at the worn wooden table and accepted a plate of biscuits, eggs, and bacon. It was more food than she usually ate in an entire day, and it tasted like heaven. As she ate, Martha chatted easily about the town, about the neighbors, about the stable business. It was pleasant and normal, and Grace found herself relaxing in a way she had not thought possible. The door opened and Isaac came in, brushing dust from his clothes. His face lit up when he saw Grace at the table, and she felt her heart do a strange little flutter. "Good morning, Miss Elwood," he said. "You look much better than you did last night." "I feel much better," she replied. "And please call me Grace." "Only if you call me Isaac," he said with a smile that transformed his serious face into something warm and open. He washed up and joined them at the table. Martha served him breakfast, and they all ate together in comfortable companionship. Grace could not remember the last time she had shared a meal with people who made her feel so welcome. "I have been thinking about your situation," Isaac said after a while. "You said Devlin has men looking for you. Do you know if they tracked you to Riverton?" "I do not think so," Grace said. "I tried to be careful about covering my trail. I took side roads, avoided the main towns, but I cannot be certain." "The thing is," Isaac continued, "you need somewhere safe to stay while we figure out what to do. You cannot just keep running forever. Eventually, you will run out of places to hide." "I know," Grace said quietly, "but what choice do I have? I cannot go to the law. Devlin owns the sheriff in Silver Bow and probably has connections throughout the territory. Who would believe my word against his?" "Maybe someone in Helena," Martha suggested. "Surely your aunt would help." "If I could get there," Grace said. "But it is still several days' journey, and I do not know if I can make it without being caught." Isaac was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking hard about something. Finally, he looked up and met Grace's eyes. "Then stay here, in Riverton, at least for a while." "I cannot ask you to do that," Grace protested. I have already imposed too much. You are not asking. I am offering, Isaac said firmly. You can stay here with us. You would be safe, fed, and rested. And maybe in that time we can figure out a better plan than just running. But what about Devlin's men? Grace asked. What if they come here? Then we deal with it, Isaac said simply. But think about it, Grace. They are looking for a woman traveling alone, probably looking desperate and scared. If you are here, settled in as part of the household, maybe even working at the stable or helping around the house, you would just look like a local. They might not even notice you. It was logical, Grace had to admit. And the idea of staying here in this warm, comfortable home with these kind people was almost unbearably tempting. But the fear was still there, the knowledge of what Devlin was capable of. I do not want to put you in danger, she said again. Life is dangerous, Martha said pragmatically. But doing the right thing is always worth the risk. Stay, Grace. At least for a few weeks. Give yourself time to heal and to think clearly about what to do next. Grace looked between them, these two people who had known her less than a day and were already treating her like family. She thought about the alternative, going back out on the road, always looking over her shoulder, never knowing when Devlin's men might catch up to her. All right, she said finally. If you are sure, I will stay, just for a little while. The smile that broke across Isaac's face made her heart flutter again, and Grace realized she might be in a different kind of danger here. Not from Devlin's men, but from the growing feelings she had for the cowboy who had offered her his home. Over the next few days, Grace settled into life with the Langs. Martha taught her how to make bread the way the family liked it, showed her the garden where she grew vegetables, and shared stories about Isaac's father and the early days of their marriage. Isaac spent most of his time working in the stable, caring for the horses people boarded there, and taking on the occasional odd job around town. Grace found herself drawn to the stable, ostensibly to help with chores, but really because she enjoyed Isaac's company. He had a quiet steadiness about him that made her feel safe, and he never pushed her to talk about things she was not ready to discuss. They worked side by side, mucking out stalls and grooming horses, and gradually Grace began to open up about her life before the murder. She told him about growing up in a small mining town, about losing both her parents to illness when she was 17, about working various jobs to support herself over the years. She talked about her dreams of maybe one day opening her own business, a restaurant perhaps, though that seemed impossible now. Isaac listened without judgment, occasionally sharing his own stories. He told her about his father, who had been a skilled horseman and had taught Isaac everything he knew about animals. He talked about the responsibility he felt to take care of his mother and honor his father's memory. He admitted that sometimes he felt lonely, that most of his friends from childhood had moved away seeking their fortunes, leaving him as one of the few young people still in Riverton. "You ever think about leaving?" Grace asked one afternoon as they brushed down a gray mare. "Sometimes," Isaac admitted, "but this is home. My father built this stable with his own hands, and my mother loves this place. I could not leave her, and she would never leave his memory behind." Grace understood that kind of loyalty, that sense of duty to family. It was part of what made Isaac so admirable, and part of what made her feelings for him grow stronger with each passing day. She tried to keep those feelings in check. She was still in danger, still potentially putting this family at risk just by being here. It would not be fair to start something with Isaac when her future was so uncertain. But it was hard to maintain that distance when he looked at her with those warm brown eyes, when he smiled at something she said, when their hands accidentally brushed while working together. 2 weeks after Grace arrived, Isaac had to travel to a neighboring town to pick up a horse he was buying. He asked Grace if she wanted to come along, and despite knowing it might not be wise to leave the relative safety of the house, she agreed. They took the wagon early in the morning, setting out under a sky painted pink and gold by the sunrise. The Montana landscape stretched out around them, vast and beautiful, and for the first time since witnessing the murder, Grace felt a sense of peace. "It is beautiful here," she said, watching the rolling hills pass by. "It is," Isaac agreed. "I have lived here my whole life, and I still find new things to appreciate about it. The way the light hits the mountains in the evening, the smell of sage after a rain, the absolute quiet you can find if you ride far enough from town." "You love it here," Grace observed. "I do," he said simply, "though I think it might be even more beautiful lately." She glanced at him and found he was looking at her, not the landscape. Her cheeks warmed and she looked away, trying to hide her pleased smile. "Isaac," she said softly. "I know," he said. "I know this is not the right time, that you have more important things to worry about than my feelings. But Grace, I need you to know that having you here, getting to know you, it has meant everything to me. You are smart and strong and kind, and I find myself thinking about you constantly." Grace's heart was racing now. "I think about you too," she admitted. "More than I should. But Isaac, I do not know what my future holds. I might have to leave tomorrow if Devlin's men find me. I cannot make promises I might not be able to keep." "I am not asking for promises," Isaac said, his voice gentle but serious. "I am just being honest with you. Whatever happens, however long you are here, I want you to know that you matter to me, that you are not alone." Tears pricked at Grace's eyes. "You matter to me too," she whispered. "So much." They rode in silence for a while after that, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken understanding. Grace felt as if something had shifted between them, as if they had crossed a threshold they could not uncross. The thought should have scared her, but instead, it felt right. The transaction for the horse went smoothly, and they started back to Riverton in the early afternoon. They were about halfway home when Grace noticed riders in the distance, heading in their direction on the main road. "Isaac," she said, her voice tight with sudden fear. "Those riders." He followed her gaze, his expression growing alert. "What about them?" "I do not know," she said. "Maybe nothing, but we should be careful." Isaac nodded and subtly checked that the wagon had room to maneuver if needed. As the riders got closer, Grace tried to get a good look at them without being obvious. There were 3 of them, rough-looking men with the kind of hard faces that suggested they were familiar with trouble. Her blood ran cold when she recognized the one in front. She had seen him before in Silver Bow, standing outside the saloon where Devlin conducted his business. He was one of Devlin's men. "Isaac," she breathed, trying to stay calm. "The one in front. He works for Devlin." She saw Isaac's jaw tighten, but his hands remained steady on the reins. "Do not look at them. Act natural. You are just a woman riding with her husband to pick up a horse. There is no reason for them to suspect anything." The riders were close now, and Grace forced herself to look down at her lap, as if she were tired or simply not interested in strangers on the road. She could feel their eyes on the wagon as they passed, could sense them slowing down slightly, could almost hear them debating whether to stop. "Good day," Isaac called out pleasantly, nodding to them but not slowing down. One of the men grunted in response, and they kept riding. Grace did not allow herself to breathe properly until they were well past, until the sound of hoofbeats had faded behind them. "They were here," she said, her voice shaking. "They are looking for me in Riverton." "We do not know that for sure," Isaac said, though his voice was tense. "They might have just been passing through. Or they might be checking every town between Silver Bow and Helena," Grace said. "Isaac, maybe I should leave, tonight, before they come back and start asking questions." "No," Isaac said firmly. If you run now, they will definitely know something is wrong. We stick to the plan. You stay at the house, help my mother, and avoid going into town where too many people might see you. We can do this, Grace. We just have to be smart about it." Grace wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she should leave to protect him and Martha. But she was also terrified of going back out on the road, of being alone and vulnerable again. So she nodded, swallowing her fear, and tried to trust that Isaac knew what he was doing. When they got back to the house, Isaac told his mother about the encounter with Devlin's men. Martha's expression grew serious, but she did not panic. "Then we will be extra cautious," she said. "Grace will stay close to the house, and we will keep watch for any strangers in town. If necessary, Isaac can ask some of the neighbors to be alert as well without telling them exactly why." "I hate this," Grace said quietly. "I hate putting you both at risk." "We know," Martha said kindly, "but you are not putting us at risk. Charles Devlin is the one doing that by sending his thugs after an innocent woman. You have done nothing wrong, Grace. Remember that." It helped to hear Martha say it, to be reminded that she was the victim here, not the criminal, but it did not make the fear go away completely. That night, Grace lay in bed unable to sleep, her mind racing with possibilities. What if those men came back? What if they started questioning people in town? Someone might remember seeing her arrive, might mention the stranger staying with the Langs. And then what? Would Devlin's men simply shoot her on sight? Would they burn down Isaac's house? She had heard stories about Devlin's ruthlessness, about the things he did to people who crossed him. She was so lost in her dark thoughts that she did not hear the soft knock on her door at first. When it came again, she sat up quickly. "Grace?" Isaac's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you awake?" She got out of bed and opened the door. Isaac stood there in his nightshirt, holding a lamp, looking concerned. "I saw your light was still on," he said quietly. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I cannot sleep," Grace admitted. "I keep thinking about those men, about what might happen." "Can I come in?" Isaac asked. "Just to talk." Grace hesitated for only a moment before nodding and stepping aside. Isaac came in and set the lamp on the small table by the window. They sat together on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough that Grace could feel his warmth. "I am scared," she confessed. "Not just for myself, but for you and your mother. You have been so kind to me, and the thought of something happening to you because of me is unbearable." "Nothing is going to happen to us," Isaac said with quiet conviction. "And nothing is going to happen to you either. I will not let it." "You cannot promise that," Grace said. "Maybe not," Isaac acknowledged. "But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. Grace, you have become important to me, more important than I ever thought possible in such a short time. Whatever happens, we will face it together." Grace looked at him, at his earnest face in the lamplight, and felt something break open inside her chest. She had been holding back, trying to protect both of them from feelings that might complicate an already complicated situation. But she could not hold back anymore. "Isaac," she whispered, "I am falling in love with you." His eyes widened, and for a moment he just stared at her. Then he reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "I am already in love with you," he said. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you in that stable, trying so hard to be brave when you were clearly terrified. Every day since then has only made me more certain. You are everything I never knew I was looking for, Grace. You are smart and strong and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life getting to know you better." Tears streamed down Grace's face, but they were not tears of fear this time. They were tears of joy, of relief, of finding something precious when she had thought she had lost everything. "But what about my situation?" she asked. "What about Devlin?" "We will deal with it," Isaac said. "Somehow we will find a way, But I am not going to let fear stop me from telling you how I feel, from being honest about what I want. I want you, Grace. I want a future with you, whatever that looks like. Grace knew it was impractical, knew that loving him might make everything more complicated. But her heart did not care about practicality. Her heart wanted what it wanted, and it wanted Isaac Lang. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed him. It was gentle and tentative at first, a question as much as a declaration. Isaac responded immediately, his hand coming up to cup her face as he deepened the kiss. It was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said again. "And whatever happens, that is not going to change." "I love you too," Grace whispered. They sat together for a long time after that, holding hands and talking quietly about everything and nothing. Isaac told her about his dreams for expanding the stable, about maybe breeding horses someday. Grace shared her hopes for the future, about the restaurant she wanted to open, about the family she had always hoped to have. They talked until the lamp burned low and exhaustion finally claimed them both. Isaac stood to leave, but Grace caught his hand. "Stay," she said softly, "just to sleep. I do not want to be alone tonight." Isaac looked torn, clearly thinking about propriety and what his mother might say. But then he looked at Grace's face, saw the vulnerability there, and nodded. They lay down together on top of the covers, fully clothed, with Isaac's arms wrapped protectively around Grace. It was chaste and innocent, but it was also deeply intimate. Grace fell asleep feeling safer than she had in weeks, surrounded by the warmth and strength of the man she loved. She woke to the sound of Martha knocking on the door. "Grace, dear, breakfast is ready." "Isaac, I know you are in there. Come down when you are both decent." Grace and Isaac looked at each other and started laughing, the tension of the moment broken by Martha's matter-of-fact tone. "She does not sound angry," Grace observed. "My mother is practical about most things," Isaac said with a smile. "Though I am sure she will have something to say about proper courting behavior." They made themselves presentable and went downstairs together. Martha was at the stove cooking eggs, and she turned to look at them with a knowing expression. "I trust you both slept well," she said dryly. "Mother," Isaac began, but she waved him off. "I am not going to lecture you," Martha said. "You are both adults, and it is clear you care for each other. But Isaac, if you are serious about this girl, then you need to think about what that means, about the future." "I am serious," Isaac said immediately, reaching for Grace's hand. "Very serious." Martha looked at Grace. "And you, I love your son," Grace said simply. "I know the timing is terrible and my situation is complicated, but my feelings are real." Martha smiled then, genuine warmth in her expression. "Then that is settled. Now sit down and eat before the food gets cold. We can discuss courting protocols after breakfast." The meal was pleasant, filled with an easy camaraderie that made Grace feel like she truly belonged. After they ate, Martha did indeed give them a gentle talk about propriety and the importance of maintaining certain boundaries until they were married. Grace blushed through most of it, but she appreciated that Martha was treating her like a daughter rather than a stranger. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness, tinged with underlying tension. Grace and Isaac spent every moment they could together, learning about each other, building the foundation for a future they both hoped they could have. They were careful about public displays of affection, aware that too much attention might bring unwanted scrutiny. But in private, they were open about their feelings, stealing kisses in the stable and holding hands while walking around the property. Martha watched their courtship with approval, clearly happy to see her son so in love. She began teaching Grace more skills, from cooking to sewing to managing household accounts, as if preparing her to be the woman of the house someday. Grace tried not to think too much about the future, about all the obstacles that still stood in their way. But it was hard not to hope, hard not to imagine a life here in Riverton with Isaac, building something real and lasting. Then, one morning about a month after Grace had first arrived, everything changed. Isaac came running into the house, his face pale. "They are here," he said quickly. "3 of them, asking around town about a woman matching your description. Someone mentioned you." Grace felt her blood turn to ice. "What do we do?" "You need to hide," Martha said immediately, her practical nature taking over. "The cellar. Go now." But before Grace could move, there was a pounding on the front door. "Open up," a rough voice called out. "We know you have the girl, send her out and nobody gets hurt." Isaac positioned himself between Grace and the door, his expression fierce. "Stay behind me." "Isaac, no," Grace said, terrified not for herself but for him. "They will hurt you." "Not if I can help it," he said grimly. The pounding came again, harder this time. Martha looked at Grace with determination. "There is a back way out through the kitchen. Take one of the horses and ride north. There is a lined shack about 5 miles from here where you can hide. Isaac and I will handle these men." "I cannot leave you," Grace protested. "You have to," Isaac said, turning to face her. His hands gripped her shoulders. "Grace, if you stay, they will take you, maybe kill all of us. If you run, at least you have a chance. We will be fine. They have no reason to hurt us if you are not here." Grace knew he was right, but the thought of leaving him, of putting him in danger, was agonizing. Still, she had no choice. She kissed him quickly, fiercely, trying to pour all her love and fear into that one moment. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Isaac said. "Now go, I will find you, I promise." Grace ran through the kitchen, out the back door and toward the stable. She could hear shouting from the front of the house, could hear the men threatening to break down the door. Her hands shook as she threw a saddle on the nearest horse, Isaac's black stallion Storm. She had barely gotten herself mounted when she heard a gunshot. Everything in her screamed to go back, to make sure Isaac and Martha were all right. But she forced herself to kick Storm into motion, racing away from the house toward the north. Tears streamed down her face as she rode, fear and guilt warring inside her chest. She found the lined shack exactly where Martha had said it would be, a small crude building used by ranch hands during cattle drives. She got Storm into the lean-to shelter beside it and then collapsed inside the shack, her whole body shaking with sobs. What had she done? She should never have stayed with the Langs, never should have let herself care so much, never should have put them in danger. If anything happened to Isaac or Martha, she would never forgive herself. Hours passed. Grace paced the small space, unable to settle, her mind creating increasingly terrible scenarios. What if the men had killed them both? What if they had burned the house down? What if Isaac had tried to fight and been shot? The sun was setting when she finally heard hoofbeats. Grace grabbed the knife she had found in the shack and pressed herself against the wall beside the door, ready to fight if it was Devlin's men who had found her. The door opened slowly. "Grace," Isaac's voice. "Grace, are you in here?" She dropped the knife and threw herself at him, wrapping her arms around him and sobbing into his chest. He held her tightly, his own breathing ragged. "You are alive," she gasped. "I heard a gunshot. I thought they had killed you." "That was one of them firing into the air to try to scare us," Isaac said. "We are fine, both of us. They searched the house, threatened us, but when they could not find you, they eventually left." "Thank God," Grace breathed. "Isaac, I am so sorry. This is all my fault." "No," he said firmly, pulling back to look at her face. "This is Charles Devlin's fault. You did nothing wrong. But Grace, we need to talk about what comes next." They sat down together on the rough wooden bench and Isaac took her hands in his. Those men, they know you were staying with us. They will be watching the house now, waiting for you to come back. You cannot go back there." "I know," Grace said quietly. "I will have to leave Riverton. Maybe Montana entirely. Maybe I can go to Oregon or California, somewhere Devlin's reach does not extend." "Or," Isaac said slowly, "you could marry me." Grace stared at him. "What, marry me?" Isaac repeated. "Tonight. There is a circuit preacher who passes through a settlement about 10 miles from here. I know where he is staying. We could be married tonight, and then you would have a new name. You would be Grace Lang instead of Grace Elwood. It might be enough to throw them off the trail, at least for a while." "Isaac," Grace said, her heart racing, "you do not have to do this. I will not trap you into marriage just to save myself." "You are not trapping me," Isaac said passionately. "I want to marry you, Grace. I have wanted it since that first night when I found you in the stable. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. The timing is not ideal, but my feelings are real. Marry me, please." Grace looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and love. She thought about everything that had happened over the past weeks, about how he had made her feel safe and valued and cherished. She thought about the life they could build together, the future that seemed impossible just a few weeks ago. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across Isaac's face was radiant. He kissed her deeply, a promise and a celebration all at once. When they pulled apart, he was laughing with sheer joy. "We should go now," he said, "before it gets too dark to travel safely. My mother packed some things for you, including one of her good dresses. She said every bride deserves something special to wear." They rode through the twilight, pushing the horses hard to cover the distance. Grace's mind was spinning with the enormity of what they were about to do. She was going to get married. Tonight. To a man she had known only a few weeks. It should have seemed crazy, impulsive, dangerous. But somehow, it felt exactly right. The settlement was little more than a cluster of buildings, but Isaac seemed to know exactly where to go. He led her to a small church where light glowed in the windows. An older man answered Isaac's knock, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he recognized the younger man. "Isaac Lang," he said warmly. "I have not seen you since your father's funeral. What brings you here at this hour?" "Reverend Jacobs," Isaac said. "I need you to perform a marriage. Tonight, right now if possible." The Reverend's eyebrows rose, but his smile did not fade. "Is that so? And who is the lucky bride?" "This is Grace Elwood," Isaac said, drawing Grace forward, "and she is about to become Grace Lang." Reverend Jacobs looked between them, clearly sensing there was a story here, but tactfully not asking. "Well then, come in, come in. Let me wake my wife to serve as witness. You cannot have a proper wedding without witnesses." An hour later, Grace stood beside Isaac in the small church, wearing Martha's dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers that Mrs. Jacobs had hastily put together. The Reverend spoke the traditional words, asking them to make their vows before God and witnesses. When it came time for Isaac to speak, he turned to face Grace fully, his hands holding hers, his voice steady and clear. "I, Isaac Lang, take you, Grace Elwood, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. In good times and bad, in wealth and poverty, in health and sickness, I will stand by your side. You have my heart, my devotion, and my complete commitment. This I vow." Tears streamed down Grace's face as she spoke her own vows. "I, Grace Elwood, take you, Isaac Lang, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and support you for all my days. You have given me safety when I had none, hope when I thought all was lost, and love beyond measure. I will stand with you through whatever life brings, building our future together with faith and devotion. This I vow." Reverend Jacobs pronounced them husband and wife, and Isaac kissed her with a tenderness that made Grace's knees weak. She was married. She had a husband, a partner, someone who had chosen to bind his life to hers despite all the complications and dangers. They signed the marriage certificate, and Reverend Jacobs gave them a copy along with his blessing. "May God watch over you both and grant you a long and happy life together." The ride back to the line shack was slower, both of them exhausted from the emotional intensity of the day. When they arrived, Isaac helped Grace down from her horse and then stood looking at her in the moonlight. "You are my wife," he said wonderingly. "And you are my husband," Grace replied, still marveling at it herself. They went inside, and for the first time they were truly alone together as a married couple. Isaac lit a small fire in the stove to ward off the night chill, and they sat together on the rough bench, neither quite sure what to say. "I know this is not the wedding night you probably imagined," Isaac said finally. "A crude shack instead of a proper bedroom, no celebration with friends and family." "I do not care about any of that," Grace said honestly. "I care that I am with you, that we are together." Isaac pulled her close, and they kissed with a new freedom, knowing they belonged to each other now in every way. The night passed in whispered words of love and gentle explorations. Two people learning how to be one. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the reality of their situation. They could not hide in the line shack forever. They needed a plan, a way to build a life together that did not involve constantly running and hiding. "We need to talk to my mother," Isaac said as they shared the food Martha had packed. "And we need to figure out how to handle Devlin's men." They rode back to the house mid-morning, approaching cautiously in case the men were still watching. But the property appeared quiet, and Martha came running out when she saw them, her face lighting up with relief. "Thank God," she said, pulling them both into a hug. "I have been so worried." "Did you do it? Are you married?" "We are," Isaac confirmed, showing her the marriage certificate. Martha's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Then we need to make this official. We need to record this with the county, get the announcement in the local paper. The more public we make it, the safer Grace will be." "What do you mean?" Grace asked. "Charles Devlin is looking for Grace Elwood, a single woman traveling alone," Martha explained. "He is not looking for Grace Lang, married woman and respected member of the Riverton community. If we establish you here quickly, make it clear you are part of this family and this town, it becomes much harder for him to simply make you disappear. There would be too many questions, too many witnesses." "That is actually brilliant," Isaac said slowly. "It is not a perfect solution, but it might buy us time to figure out something more permanent." Over the next few days, they put Martha's plan into action. They recorded the marriage with the county clerk, who congratulated them warmly. They placed an announcement in the local newspaper, describing the wedding and welcoming Grace to the community. Isaac made a point of introducing Grace as his wife to everyone he did business with, establishing her presence and legitimacy. The response from the community was overwhelmingly positive. People who had known Isaac his whole life were happy to see him settled with a good woman. Some of the older ladies in town organized a small celebration at the church, presenting Grace with handmade gifts for her new home. It was touching and overwhelming, and it made Grace feel like maybe, just maybe, she could actually have a life here. But the fear never completely went away. Every time a stranger rode into town, Grace felt her heart race. Every unexpected knock on the door made her jump. She knew Devlin's men were still out there, still looking. The question was whether Martha's plan would be enough to protect her. 3 weeks after the wedding, a well-dressed man arrived in Riverton, checking into the hotel and asking questions around town. Grace spotted him from the window of the stable and immediately recognized the calculated way he observed everything. He was not just a traveler passing through. He was investigating. She found Isaac working in one of the stalls. "There is a man," she said quietly. "I think he is working for Devlin." Isaac's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. "Then we stick to our story. You are my wife. We have nothing to hide." The man came to the stable that afternoon, leading a horse he claimed needed shoeing. Isaac greeted him professionally while Grace continued her work organizing tack, trying to appear unconcerned. "You must be the new Mrs. Lang," the man said pleasantly, his eyes sharp as he studied Grace. "I heard you recently married. Congratulations." "Thank you," Grace said, keeping her voice steady. "Yes, Isaac and I were married last month. It was very sudden, I understand," the man continued. "You are not from around here, are you?" "No," Grace said, the lie coming smoothly. "I am from Idaho originally. My family moved around a lot with my father's work. I came here visiting a friend and met Isaac, and well, when you know, you know." "Indeed," the man said. "And before Idaho, does it matter?" Isaac interrupted, his voice pleasant but with an edge. "My wife's history is her own business." "Now, about your horse, when do you need the shoeing done by?" The man studied them both for a long moment before finally turning his attention back to Isaac. "Tomorrow morning would be fine. I will return then." After he left, Grace sagged against the wall. "He knows," she whispered. "Or at least he suspects." "Maybe," Isaac agreed, "but he does not have proof. And more importantly, he now knows you are married to me, integrated into this community. That changes things." Grace hoped he was right. But that night she could not sleep, plagued by nightmares of Devlin's men dragging her away from Isaac, of gunfire, of blood. The next morning the man returned for his horse as promised. Isaac had done the work, and the man paid without argument. As he was leaving, he turned back to look at them. "Mrs. Lang," he said, "you bear a striking resemblance to someone I was hired to find, a woman named Grace Elwood who witnessed a crime and then disappeared. But I suppose that is just a coincidence, you being a married woman with a life here." Grace forced herself to meet his eyes. "I do not know anyone by that name, but I hope you find who you are looking for." The man nodded slowly. "I am sure I will. Or I will report back to my employer that the trail has gone cold. It would be a shame for there to be any trouble in such a nice, peaceful town." The implicit threat hung in the air. He was telling them that if they left things alone, he would report that Grace could not be found. But if she tried to come forward about the murder, there would be consequences. After he rode away, Isaac held Grace tightly. "It is over," he said. "He is going to tell Devlin he could not find you." "Because he is afraid of causing trouble here," Grace said. "Because I am not alone and vulnerable anymore." "Exactly," Isaac confirmed. "Martha was right. Being part of this community, being my wife, that gave you protection. Devlin could make a lone woman disappear without anyone caring. But making the wife of a well-liked businessman disappear, that would bring law enforcement, investigations, attention he does not want." Grace let herself believe it, let herself feel the relief that maybe, finally, she was safe. The danger would probably never be completely gone, not as long as Devlin was alive and she knew his secret. But for now, it seemed she had found sanctuary. Life settled into a new rhythm. Grace threw herself into her role as Isaac's wife and partner. She helped in the stable, managed the household accounts, worked alongside Martha in the garden. She made friends among the women in town, joining their sewing circles and church activities. Slowly, she became not just Isaac's wife but a valued member of the community in her own right. Her relationship with Isaac deepened every day. They talked about everything, sharing their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. At night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they explored their physical connection, learning what brought each other pleasure and comfort. Grace had never imagined marriage could be like this. Such an easy partnership built on respect and genuine affection. 6 months after their hasty wedding, Grace realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was stress or perhaps a lingering effect of all the upheaval in her life. But when it happened a second time, and when she started feeling queasy in the mornings, she knew. She told Martha first, needing another woman's perspective before saying anything to Isaac. Martha was overjoyed, immediately pulling Grace into a tight hug. "A baby," she said, tears in her eyes. "Isaac will be so happy. He has always wanted children." Grace was happy too, but there was fear mixed in with the joy. Bringing a child into the world when her own safety was still somewhat uncertain felt risky. But it also felt right, like the final piece of building a real life here. She told Isaac that evening, leading him out to the stable where they could have privacy. "I have something to tell you," she began, suddenly nervous about how he would react. "What is it?" Isaac asked, immediately alert to her tone. "I am pregnant," Grace said simply. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Isaac just stared at her, processing the information. Then a huge grin spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably startled all the horses. He picked Grace up and spun her around, laughing with pure happiness. "A baby," he said, setting her down gently and immediately looking concerned. "Are you all right? Do you feel all right? Should you be working so hard?" "I am fine," Grace assured him, touched by his immediate concern. "Women have babies all the time. I am healthy and strong. Everything will be fine." "We are going to be parents," Isaac said wonderingly. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "There is a child in there, our child." "Yes," Grace said softly. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy." Isaac pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Grace, I am more than happy. I am thrilled, honored, maybe a little terrified, but mostly just overwhelmed with joy. This child is going to be so loved." That night, lying in bed with Isaac's arm draped protectively over her, Grace let herself fully embrace the happiness. She had come so far from that terrified woman sleeping in a stable. She had found not just safety but love, not just shelter but home. And now she was going to bring a new life into this world, a child who would know nothing but love and security. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Grace bloomed under the care of Martha and Isaac, who both treated her like she was made of glass despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of working. The women in town rallied around her, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Grace felt embraced by this community in a way she had never experienced before. When Grace was 7 months along, news came that shook the entire territory. Charles Devlin had been killed in his own mine, crushed in a collapse that investigators said was caused by his own cost-cutting measures that had made the structure unstable. Some of his workers had died with him, and the whole situation had sparked an outcry about mine safety and the responsibility of owners to protect their workers. Grace heard the news from Martha, who had learned it at the general store. For a moment, she could not process it. The man who had haunted her nightmares, who had made her run, who had nearly cost her everything, was dead. "It is over," she whispered. "It is really over." Isaac came in from the stable and found her crying. He immediately assumed something was wrong with the baby, but she quickly explained about Devlin. "I should not be happy someone is dead," she said through her tears. "But Isaac, I am. I am so relieved. I do not have to be afraid anymore. Our child will never have to fear that man." "Then cry all you need to," Isaac said gently, holding her. "Release all that fear and pain. You are safe now, completely safe. And you never have to think about Charles Devlin again." 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Grace went into labor. Martha and the midwife attended her while Isaac paced nervously downstairs. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Grace thought she could not endure any more. But Martha held her hand and encouraged her, and the midwife guided her through each contraction. Finally, after nearly 20 hours, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the tiny, squalling infant on Grace's chest. "A healthy baby boy." Grace looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect face, and the shock of dark hair so like Isaac's, and fell completely in love. She had never experienced anything like this overwhelming rush of protective love. Isaac came in moments later, his face anxious until he saw Grace and the baby both alive and well. Then he broke down, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at his son. "He is perfect," Isaac breathed. "Grace, you did so well. He is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Isaac's father. Thomas Lang, born in October 1877, healthy and whole and surrounded by love. The years that followed were busy and full. Thomas grew into a curious, active toddler who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. Grace finally opened her restaurant, a small place in town that quickly became popular for her excellent cooking and warm atmosphere. Isaac expanded the stable, building a reputation as one of the best horsemen in the territory. When Thomas was 3, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret, after Martha. The little girl had her mother's dark hair and her father's warm brown eyes, and she wrapped everyone around her tiny finger from day one. Martha lived to see both her grandchildren, passing peacefully in her sleep when Thomas was 5 and Margaret was 2. She went knowing her son was happy, her daughter-in-law thriving, and her grandchildren well-loved. They buried her next to Isaac's father, and Grace planted roses on her grave, remembering the woman who had welcomed her without question and taught her what it meant to be part of a family. Life in Riverton continued. Grace and Isaac raised their children, built their businesses, and grew old together. They added 2 more children to their family, a second son named Henry, and another daughter they called Rose. The house that had once seemed so spacious when it was just Grace, Isaac, and Martha was now full of noise and laughter, and the chaos of raising 4 children. Grace never forgot those days when she was running and afraid, when her future seemed impossibly bleak. But they faded into memory, a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had been given. Sometimes, when she was working in the stable and caught sight of Isaac brushing down a horse, she would remember that first night, terrified and desperate, when a cowboy had looked at her and said, "My home is yours." Those words had changed everything. They had offered not just shelter, but belonging, not just safety, but love. They had been the beginning of a life Grace had never imagined she could have. Now, years later, with her children grown and children of their own, Grace would sit on the porch with Isaac, watching the Montana sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. His hair was gray now, and there were lines around his eyes, but when he looked at her, she still saw the young man who had taken a chance on a frightened stranger. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac would ask, taking her hand. "How lucky I am," Grace would answer honestly. "How different my life could have been if you had not found me that night." "I am the lucky one," Isaac would insist, as he always did. "You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. You, our children, this life we built together. It has been better than anything I could have dreamed." They would sit in comfortable silence then, content in the life they had created. The stable was still running, now managed by Thomas, who had inherited his father's gift with horses. Margaret had married a rancher and lived just outside town with her 3 children. Henry was studying to be a lawyer in Helena, determined to make sure people like Charles Devlin were held accountable for their actions. And Rose, their youngest, was teaching at the local school, shaping young minds with patience and creativity. Grace had never gotten to testify against Devlin, never gotten justice in that traditional sense. But she had gotten something better. She had gotten a life, a real life, full of love and family and purpose. She had gotten Isaac, who remained her best friend and greatest love even after 3 decades of marriage. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the house. The grandchildren ran through the yard, shrieking with laughter. Their children and their spouses shared stories and memories. Someone brought out a fiddle, and there was dancing and singing until well after dark. Isaac pulled Grace aside at one point, leading her away from the noise to a quiet spot by the stable. It was the same place where he had proposed, where he had offered her not just his name but his whole heart. 30 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. It has gone by so fast. And yet I cannot imagine any other life, Grace said. Every day with you has been a gift, Isaac. I have something for you, Isaac said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a piece of paper yellowed with age. Do you remember this? Grace unfolded it carefully. It was the marriage certificate from that hasty wedding, the one that had been both a practical solution and a declaration of love. She had not looked at it in years, but seeing it now brought back all the emotions of that night. I think about that night sometimes, Isaac said softly. How young we were, how uncertain everything seemed. I was terrified I was making a mistake, moving too fast, taking advantage of your desperate situation. You were not, Grace said firmly. You were saving my life in every way that matters. But I was also falling in love with you, Isaac continued. And I was afraid that maybe you only said yes because you had no other choice. That maybe if things had been different, if you had not been in danger, you never would have chosen me. Grace looked at her husband, at this man she had built a life with, and took his face in her hands. Isaac Lang, I would choose you in any circumstances, in any life. Yes, we married quickly. Yes, there were practical reasons. But my feelings were real then and they are real now. I love you. I have loved you for 30 years, and I will love you until my last breath. Isaac kissed her then, the same way he had kissed her on their wedding night, full of passion and promise. Around them, the sounds of their family celebrating drifted on the night air, a testament to everything they had built together. My home is yours, Isaac whispered against her lips, echoing those words from so long ago. And my heart is yours, Grace replied, now and always. They stood there together, 2 people who had started as strangers in a stable and had become partners in every sense of the word. The life they had built was not perfect, had not been without struggles and sorrows. But it had been theirs, built on a foundation of love and trust and mutual respect. As they walked back to join their family, Grace felt a deep sense of contentment. She had found her place in this world, had created something beautiful from those dark days of fear and running. The scared young woman who had hidden in a stable was still part of her, but she had grown into so much more. She was a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a successful businesswoman, a valued member of her community. And it had all started with a cowboy who had seen her fear and offered not judgment but kindness, who had given her not just shelter but a home, who had offered not just protection but love. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and inevitable sorrows. Grace and Isaac watched their children flourish, their grandchildren grow, and eventually they welcomed great-grandchildren into the family. The stable passed to Thomas, who ran it with the same dedication his father had shown. The restaurant eventually closed, but Grace's recipes were passed down through the family, a delicious legacy that kept her memory alive in every kitchen. When Isaac was 71, he took ill with a fever that the doctor could not treat. Grace sat by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and talking to him about their life together. She reminded him of that first night, of their hasty wedding, of the births of their children. She told him about every moment of joy they had shared, every obstacle they had overcome together. "I am not ready to let you go," she whispered through her tears. "I need more time." Isaac squeezed her hand weakly. "We have had a lifetime, my love, and what a lifetime it has been. Do not be sad. We got to grow old together to see our family flourish. Not everyone is so blessed." "I know," Grace said, "but it still is not enough. It could never be enough." "Promise me something," Isaac said, his voice getting weaker. "Promise me you will keep living, really living after I am gone. Spend time with the children and grandchildren. Laugh, find joy. Do not spend your remaining years just mourning me." "I promise," Grace said, though she could not imagine how she would keep that promise. Isaac was her whole heart. He passed quietly 2 days later, surrounded by his family. Grace held his hand as he took his last breath, and she felt a part of her soul leave with him. The funeral was large, a testament to how many lives Isaac had touched. People came from all over the territory to pay their respects to the man who had been known for his kindness and integrity. Grace stood at the grave beside Martha's, saying goodbye to the love of her life. But she had made a promise, so she kept living. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, sharing stories about their grandfather. She worked in the garden, taking comfort in the growth and renewal that came with each spring. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, she would walk out to the stable and remember a young cowboy who had found a frightened woman hiding in the shadows and had given her everything. Grace lived another 8 years after Isaac passed, long enough to see Thomas's youngest son get married, long enough to welcome 2 more great-grandchildren into the family. She remained sharp and active until the end, a matriarch who was deeply loved and respected. She passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79, and they buried her next to Isaac in the Riverton Cemetery. On her headstone, the family had engraved a simple message that captured her entire story. She found home in his heart. The family gathered after the funeral, sharing memories and comforting each other. Thomas stood up and raised his glass in a toast. "To my mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She taught us that home is not just a place, but people. That family is not always about blood, but about the connections we choose to make. She showed us what real love looks like, the kind that endures through danger and hardship and the simple passage of time. My father used to say that finding her was the best thing that ever happened to him. But I think they saved each other. 2 people who met by chance and built something extraordinary together." Everyone raised their glasses, toasting Grace's memory. And in that room, filled with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the legacy of that night in the stable lived on. A legacy of kindness, of taking chances, of offering home to those who need it most. A legacy of love that had started with 5 simple words: "My home is yours."